It should be no wonder that government perpetuates nationalistic and patriotic values. If they didn't, people might not support the state agendas or their wars. It should be no wonder that the Catholic Church perpetuates the idea that humans are born into sin. Otherwise, people might not show up to be saved. And it should be no wonder every major city on this planet is cloaked with corporate advertising working to force materialism and inadequacy. Why? Because otherwise, some people might just be happy with what they have and not contribute to the profit and perpetuation of a corporation or an economy. Regardless, when it comes to cultural influence, nothing can hold a candle to the vast psychological implications that have developed due to the system of monetary finance. Money, contrary to the attitudes of most of the world's population today, is not a natural resource, nor does it represent resources. In fact, by all standards of logic, money is only functionally relevant in society when natural resources and the mechanisms of creation are scarce. And thus, a system has emerged where people are given value for their skills in exchange for their servitude, which can thus be used as a medium of exchange for those supposed scarce resources. Sadly, the culture is now fully indoctrinated into this frame of reference. And like the rising sun, most cannot even consider any other possibility for social functionality. In fact, some have even redefined the relevance of money itself by being conditioned to think that money represents choice, that money somehow has something to do with democracy, and the greatest illusion that the monetary structure is a tool of liberty. Well, while money has indeed served a positive role overall in the course of our social evolution, adaptation and change and improvement is still unstoppable. The fact is, most of the original problems which require the development of the economic system we see today are no longer pressing due to the dramatic advancement of science and technology. We now have the means to move into a new paradigm, one where the negative byproducts of our current social establishment, such as perpetual war, human exploitation, poverty, and environmental destruction, are no longer tolerable. What is advocated here is merely the next step in our social evolution as dictated not by a person or group's opinion, but by statistics, trends, basic inference and extrapolation, all deduced by the scientific method. Unfortunately, regardless of how logical, clear, and obvious new ideas may seem, the public still remains, on average, a tremendous fear of any form of social change. This is largely due to the propaganda and indoctrination which has been pushed upon them by the established powers, which, of course, prefer to maintain their power. These institutions range from religious organizations to government to business. In fact, it really isn't the technical understandings and implementations of the physical attributes that comprise the resource-based economy which is the problem. We know we can do it technically. We know it can happen. The analysis has been extrapolated. It is the outdated cultural values, and this is such a testy subject. The cultural values and the education barriers of our conditioned culture is the most difficult aspect to consider, and that's one of the reasons I'm approaching this presentation as I have, because I want people to understand that we have to move somewhere. This is where the Zeitgeist movement comes in. We are not here to tell people what to think or believe. We're here to spread statistical information and socially positive value identifications in hope of bringing people into an awareness of the incredibly positive possibilities the future can hold. Once these understandings are fully realized, I think most people will never be able to look at the world in the same way again, and the problems we find as commonplace today will become simply unacceptable, motivating change. Now, there are countless well-intentioned people and activist organizations out there, and they keep popping up like weeds. It's incredible to me how many of these there are, and all admirable and amazing. And they're yelling at the top of their lungs about the rampant problems and injustices in our world. Yet, as you tend to find, very few actually offer any solutions whatsoever. Those that do offer solutions, however, always frame those solutions within the context of the current established system. Very little regard seems to be given to the root structure of our social design. The Venus Project, and hence the Zeitgeist movement, is different. Our fundamental focus is finding the foundational sources of our social problems and working from that lowest common denominator to create solutions. And when it comes to social corruption, poverty, environmental disregard, human exploitation, and most personal and social turmoil in the world today, an important realization is that most of these problems are not the result of some particular company, some nefarious elite group, or some government legislation. These are symptoms of the foundational problems. And this is the ultimate realization when it comes to how you look at the problems of the world today. There's a massive superstitious basis out there. It's us against them that is extremely poisonous to the development because people are constantly looking for someone else to blame when it's really themselves because they continue to perpetuate the system that creates these things. The real issue is human behavior. And human behavior, which will be addressed in this presentation specifically, is largely created and reinforced by the social patterns required for survival, as necessitated by the social system of the period. We are products of our society, and the fact of the matter is, it is the very foundation of our socio-economic system and environmental condition which has created the sick culture you see around you. Our current system is based almost exclusively upon human exploitation, resource abuse, and redundant waste. It is simply what our system does. And as far as the infamous they, it is simply another social distortion, culminated and reinforced by our environment. There is no singular they. In Zeitgeist 1, I describe the men behind the curtain to the effect of a specific niche of economics, the ones that control most government policy, and hence those are the banks. The banks have been running things forever. But that is still a product. These are still human beings. We're dealing with negative tendencies. The they syndrome is absolutely obsolete. And next time you hear anybody talk about the they, please try to correct them. It's a religious mentality. Duality is good and evil. The bottom line is that we can spend the rest of our existences stomping on the ants that mysteriously wander out from underneath the refrigerator, setting traps or laws. Or we can get rid of the spoiled food behind it, which is causing the infestation to begin with.